Good morning, Dr. Eleanor.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Yeah, oh, of course, yes. It's Friday, August 16th. It's time for another chat. Like always, we kind of start off with what you've been working on. Any updates this week?
Uh, this past week, I've been running the 5-day step over the threshold to a new way of being. And uh, I've been completely blown away by the feedback.
Hmm.
Every day in each world, people are having huge breakthroughs and awareness about themselves. And so I've been responding to everybody who uh, gives us the feedback because there's a question each day. And it's really nice to uh, have those breakthroughs for people
Mhm.
that it's wonderful. And we've done two um, question and answers, and those have been really fun.
Mhm.
Uh, so that ends today is the integrated world, and then they have the weekend. The materials are available until next week, next weekend, next Friday. And then if the people who participated will have an option to buy them so they can have them evergreen. But at some point I'll do it again. And then I am starting to teach in 2 weeks. So the 27th is a 4 world class, and the 28th is the human design practitioner 4 world class. And the human design practitioner class is overbooked at this point.
Mhm.
So if there are a few more people who sign up, I will add another class and break it into two.
Okay.
I don't want to compromise the attention I give to the people who are in the class.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be doing that. I've been what I've been doing this past week to some degree when I've had time is to edit the Triple Design Matrix book that I wrote with Ra. And that book has an interesting history. Um, I taught the first Dream Rave class in November of 1999 when Ra and I gave the first Rave Life Science seminar. And Ra taught about formats for the first time, and I taught about the Dream Rave. And Ra didn't know anything about the dream design, really, except that when we sleep, all the voice told him was that when we sleep, we go horizontal and move into a mammalian matrix. So I hadn't, so anyhow, I taught about what the dream design is and my early observation that if someone was not sacrally defined and gained the sacral center when they slept, they were very different than someone who didn't have the sacral center and gained it. So if you gain it or lose it, I noticed that it made a difference in the way people made decisions. And Rod didn't really understand that because he didn't understand anything about dreams. And so I taught the first class and laid out a whole bunch of stuff. And as we were walking to my car, Ross said, okay, now I can do some keynotes. Now I understand more.
Mm.
Uh, and then we taught another class in Sedona in 2000, January of 2000. And for that class, my recollection is that I opened it with sleep architecture. Then Ra taught the dream design, the rave architecture, and his interpretation. And then I came back and did casework.
Mm.
So I read a couple of three cases, I think. Um, and what's so interesting going over that material is that Ra was saying in it that you have to, that thanks to me, you have to integrate the matrices. And you can't just use the human design matrix because you lose the information. He also said, even when you're sleeping, your basic matrix is still running the energy from the transits. So basically, he was validating the eight charts, the fact that the matrices are a unified, integrated field of consciousness, and reading it is much more complex than a human design chart. He also said, and I came to this sentence today, and I had to really laugh, but he said, you know, with all the work that we're doing in researching the dream design and matrices, blah, 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 I could retire and just leave the rest of the work to Eleanor, which apparently I have been doing.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that as I'm getting ready to teach about the four worlds and going back through some of the research, I'm finding interesting data points, interesting observations, interesting nuances. And now I have two people who have spoken to me about the four worlds, independent of me talking about the four worlds.
What do you mean by that? They've come to you.
And it's what you know, when the time is right for a discovery,
Okay.
multiple people come up with the same thing independent of each other.
Mhm.
And it's one of the ways we know that the data is real.
Mhm.
So there's one lady who's going to be in my four worlds class who has designed a game for the four worlds. And we got together because her, how she uses and works with the four worlds is very different than how I do. But the understanding of the four worlds is not different. And I just spoke to somebody else who came up with four labels to tell people as part of their process. And the missing piece to that was that she should be doing it in each of the four worlds in order for it to work. It was too global.
Right. Sorry, were they familiar with your work in the four worlds, or they came to their own
No,
conclusions?
independent.
Okay.
That's why I say when,
Yeah.
when you have independent discoveries of the same thing,
Mhm.
you know it's one way of validating the science.
Yeah. I've had a recurring thought the last couple of weeks. Like when Ra received the download in 1987, I guess, that that wasn't that just sort of a download of consciousness at the time? And because we're mutating and changing all the time, if we're still playing music from that song sheet back then, we're not evolving, right? So I mean that's why the information needs to keep getting updated, improved, right? Seems logical.
Also, no one of us is going to be given all the information.
No.
We're given pieces because the intent is that it should be a unified whole.
So I've got a bunch of questions for you, and it's gonna be all over the place today. But just be like you said that, and last week you said something right near the end of the call. You said that the channel 1333, I don't think you said it was like the path to the Akashic records, but it was like correlated with the Akashic records. And I didn't know what you meant by that, and I wanted to follow up. I know almost nothing about it, but I have had an interest in it for the last year. Like it just was found myself drawn to it. I had an Akashic record or Akashic reading of sorts, and it was very interesting, and I didn't really understand it. Can you explain the Akashic records? From what I heard, it was something like it's all information in the past and all information in the future. So it effectively is
Everything is all knowledge.
okay.
Um, The 1333 is a channel of listening. And what are we listening to?
Mhm.
And I don't know if I have it here. Maybe I do. Yeah, I do. Let's see which path of intelligence it is. 13.
And naturally, I'm interested because I have that channel. And at least in traditional human design sense, 13 is my personality sun. So, and I've had lots of lessons and interesting discoveries about listening and how I was a terrible listener before. Like I just didn't hear anything because I was listening for danger. So unless there was danger, I wasn't listening.
Well, the 1333 is the Emperor card,
Emperor.
Emperor in
Okay.
the tarot, this card.
Okay.
And it's Aries, and it's the constituting intelligence. Now, channel 1333, my description of it is you're an excellent listener because your depth of awareness includes synchronicity and other dimensions of consciousness.
Mhm.
When you're coming through the central column of a body graph, that central column is the satsuma. It's the spine.
Mhm.
The energy moves up like that. And it's a very core part of who we are.
Mhm.
The 1333, the 33 is in Leo, and the 13 is in Aquarius. So when you look at the 1333 and your sun is in Aries, you have to piece together what a sun in Aries in a channel that is a fixed element in both the Leo and the Aquarius. They're both fixed signs. And they're strong signs. The path is the path of, it's the 15th path of intelligence on the tree of life. It's the constituting intelligence. I am the constituting intelligence, containing the limitless to bring into creation that which can be perceived in form. So the Emperor card is a card that is very concerned with order, with regularity, with things being the way they're supposed to be. Now, if we think about what that means and who the emperor is, he's in charge. And how would you take what I've read to you, including the astrology signs and the hexagrams, and how would you interpret it for you?
Well, astrology is still very much my weakness. So when you say something's a fixed sign, I don't even actually still know what that means, but I hear it all the time. So I will say that when you speak that language, I don't quite get it. But from my experience, um, the whole time you were talking, I kept thinking about Tai Chi Gun, actually. I was thinking about the infinity symbol, because I have noticed, especially lately, when I'll attend Heather's online class, or I'm just doing my own thing where I'm kind of like moving. I feel like I'm doing, I feel like I'm doing the infinity sign up my spine. So
You
like I can
are.
actually feel things shifting, right? And then all of a sudden there's like a fluid and like it really at times can be almost overwhelming. Um, And so, I'll either do it through Tai Chi Gong, or I've been calling it tree yoga. And I just go stand by a tree, put my hands on it, and then, rock back and like do the rocking back and forth.
Great.
Yeah, figure eight. And I swear I'm getting some sort of download. At the time, it makes no sense. Like it's just a feeling. Like I can feel energy coming through my hands. It feels like data, but I haven't, it's like the next day or a day later, all of a sudden there's just some sort of like coin drop and it's like bink and something arrives. Um, I know that's not really answering your question, but that's kind of how I've been experimenting with that. I never correlated it to the 1333 or any of that. But that's what comes to mind when you ask that question.
The emperor likes order, likes to have things work the way they're supposed to work. Now, we have all knowledge. All of us has all knowledge. And we're here for a purpose, with a mission. I think the 1333, when you have it, makes you someone who other people talk to. And if we're looking at it from a personal standpoint, the task is for you to master individually, each of us who has the 1333, how we can take in the information we need to master the mental world.
Mm-hmm.
We have to master the spiritual world first. But the 1333 is actually in the emotional angelic world.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a question of taking all the information that you have from any source and understanding the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the Akashic records are. Some people remember past lives and others don't.
Mm-hmm.
I've remembered quite a few of my past lives and validated them. But do they mean anything? It's interesting. Does it
What?
change life? Only depending on whether it's been worked with or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything else.
I'd like you to describe one of those experiences. I'm going to do a past life regression, I think, in 2 weeks with a friend here. And I think I've told you, I don't have visuals like that. Like it's very rare for me to have any kind of experience like others describe. But, and it was in a conversation this morning with a couple of friends. We were talking about how we're getting healthier lately, like we're making better decisions. And when I found design, I didn't, at the time, I wasn't looking for something to help me, teach me to eat better or take care of my body. It just became time that I needed to. And as more things resonated, I wanted my body to keep up. And the healthier I'm getting, the more spiritual connection I'm having, right? Like my body was, I beat the shit out of my body most of my life. And, in ways I'm amazed I'm alive. But so that's been pretty profound. It's come with consequences, like being like extra sensitive to energy, and because it was like I was wearing a bulletproof vest through life, it just like wasn't really there. So when you've experienced or seen a past life, is it your your soul is just in a different body at a different time, and you can see the surroundings and the circumstances, or is it a knowing, or what is that like? I guess I'm asking because in 2 weeks I'll be curious to know if like maybe I've experienced it already and just not associated it. Yeah.
It can be different ways. One past life was during a Kundalini experience when I remembered drowning in the eruption at Herculaneum.
Hmm.
And many of the people who were friends of mine were with me in Herculaneum.
Hmm.
And my mother was with me in Herculaneum.
I've never heard of it. Is that like kind of like Atlantis, like another time, another world, another?
It was destroyed in the eruption of Vesuvius. And the whole city was covered with ash.
Hmm.
And the in 1938, an excavation discovered it, and there was a book about the Villa of Mysteries, a whole villa intact, because nothing was destroyed, it was just all preserved.
Hmm.
And the people were just covered with ash. So when I was in Jungian training, one of the things we studied was the Villa of Mysteries, because well, now I see it in a whole different light than I did then. Given some of Jonathan Cahn's work on the return of the gods and the situation cosmically now on the planet, we can interpret the Dionysian gods with a little bit more clarity than when I was taking the Villa of Mysteries class. But in any case, around the time that I was in that class, I started having memories coming in randomly of Pliny the Elder or craving oysters. Turns out Pliny was an oyster fisherman.
Hmm.
He was also the first homeopath. And he died on his second trip into Pompeii and Herculaneum to rescue people. And as he came in the second time, Vesuvius erupted and he was also covered. But it was, that was a huge, huge experience for me, because that was the one that I was paralyzed for 3 hours while I was remembering it. Other ones I just spontaneously remembered.
Hmm.
And early in my career as a clinician, I studied with Dolores Cannon before she was even famous. I had her documents in typewritten form on past life regression. So I'm not very hypnotizable, so past life regression never worked for me, but I've done it on many people.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I was telling you last week about a hypnosis experience I had. And I remember saying, like, I felt like in hypnosis, I was like, yeah, I'll play along because we're in a class and I don't want him to feel like he didn't hypnotize me. And so I felt like I was just playing along. But at the end, I had a profound experience, right? And so I'm glad that happened, because otherwise I might have like just left it. So yeah, I'm just responding to like not being hypnotizable. Like I didn't feel I could be either. And then it was just like I kind of just consented to go along with
There
it.
are scales of hypnotizability. Uh, when I say I'm not hypnotizable, I'm not hypnotizable easily. I've been tested numerous times
Yeah.
using the Stanford hypnotizability scale, and I don't think that way.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand like there's a certain percentage that it really doesn't have the same impact like others for sure. Well, on that subject, I was asking my friend Jonathan this morning for some questions for you, and he did. Oh no, sorry, it was Nell actually that asked about hypnosis. So now asked this morning, uh, what to be aware of when it comes to hypnosis? What doesn't work? What is actually dangerous? and what truly creates lasting change? And then she followed that up with, what is your definition of hypnosis?
We use hypnosis all the time in daily life. We're all functioning hypnotically. For example, when we drive our car and things are automatic.
Mm.
There are different levels of hypnosis. I am coming out of very classical training. I was trained at University of Chicago by Erica from Reichman, who is one of the leading people, was a leading person in hypnosis. And then I took a class, a supervision class for a year on hypnosis. And then I was president of the Southern California Society for Clinical Hypnosis for 2 years. And then I co-founded the Los Angeles Erickson Institute with Norma and Phil Beretta and Marvin, Diane, my daughter, and myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I do professional hypnosis, not stage hypnosis.
Yeah.
Well,
You'd be pretty funny if you did stage hypnosis.
I've done, early on, I had a client who did a hysterectomy with hypnosis as the only anesthesia.
Mm-hmm.
And I hypnotized her for that. And I played in my training with the iron arm and the balloon and, the things that show you if somebody is hypnotizable.
Mm-hmm.
In the hands of someone who does not know what they're doing clinically, hypnosis can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And hypnosis is all over the place now. And if you've ever worked with anyone who's had a abreaction, you would not take hypnosis so lightly.
An abreaction? What's an abreaction?
It means that they decompensate to the point that they fall apart.
Okay.
Hypnosis is a powerful unconscious tool. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to read the signals, you can put someone in a trance and they can go deep and they can get in touch with stuff that is upsetting, and it can do damage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when I was president of the Hypnosis Society, it was a clinical hypnosis society, and in order to get into it, you had to be licensed as a clinician. It was not, and that's why I differentiate between stage hypnosis, which is not responsible hypnosis. When I do clean language, I consider it conversational hypnosis. Because people go into their own internal hypnotic state. So there are many ways to work with hypnosis. Some of them are very superficial and very safe. Some of them, when you're dealing with even things like past life, if somebody got into a past life where they were killed violently, it could be very traumatic for them to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to reel it back and take them out of that state, it can be disruptive from a personality standpoint. So I like to use hypnosis pre and post surgery. It works really well for that. I like to use it. I've treated people for irritable bowel syndrome. There's a hypnotic protocol for that that's exceptional. There's a good protocol for stopping smoking. I have not found it highly effective for weight loss. Generally, I've used it with children very effectively with children. I've used it sometimes for phobias. I tend to use the emotional freedom technique or thought field therapy for that. Is that a sufficient answer?
That's great. Yeah. Okay. I've got questions all over the place, so it's gonna be a bit random today, but I don't think we talked about this online, but I think we talked about it offline. But you were you used the word abomination to describe certain versions of body graphs out there. And I got to thinking about it, and I had a conversation with Now about it, and she said something really interesting, which was like if you were to print your body graph and if it's correct and put it near you energetically, there's a benefit to that. And I don't know where she pulled that information from, but I thought that was very interesting, right? Like I'm exposed to lots of body graphs of myself of things in the past, and I would like to, I have a bunch of questions here. One, can you define sacred geometry, in at least in context with the body graph? And what do you think about that notion? Like actually having a copy of it nearby, and it's just kind of like energetically you're paying attention to it versus, a JPEG in your phone's app or
Okay,
something,
let me
right?
take it one at a time. Sacred geometry is ancient.
Mhm.
And for anyone interested, you can go to David Wilcock's Sunday lecture. I think it was the week before last. And about 2 hours and 30 minutes in, he started talking about the sacred geometry that had come up in crop circles.
Mhm.
And the crop circles were drawn with a circle and a square around them. And it turned out that there is a astrophysicist who David was quoting, who did a whole bunch of research on the geometry and measurements of the sun, the moon, the earth, and the proportions of how they come together and the alignment. And when you take that geometry and you bring it down to earth, there are many areas where that same geometry holds, like the proportions of parts of the body, the diagrams drawn of certain things, the same in the crop circles. And as David said, when you find this so many different places, it's God. There's no other way to explain it. How all these disparate kinds of things have the same measurements.
Mhm. So when you say measurements, do you mean the angles of, say, a triangle, or do you
Golden
mean
mean, the
sorry?
golden mean. And when you look at the tree of life or the pyramids, and you begin measuring angles of the sun and the moon and the earth and the proportions of the pyramid and where the rooms are in it, and in the tree of life where the Sephiroth are and where the paths of intelligence are, and where the tree of life is 3 concentric circles exactly placed. And when you measure, there are certain measurements that are this sacred geometry that you can extend out to the universe, and it will have the same numbers. So the body graph, and Ra was very, I asked the question. He actually had answered it in the Triple Design Matrix book. And I said to him, you know, Ra, when we're horizontal, you look at the hexagrams, we're coming in this way to the hexagram. But when we're horizontal, we're still coming in this way from the neutrino stream. So it's hitting I have the hiccups. It's hitting the hexagrams in a different way. Does that make a difference?
I don't fully follow, but I appreciate the answer. But you immediately...
In the Triple Design Matrix book, what Ross said is if you lay down to take a nap, and you lay down, let's say, on your bed or a couch, you go horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
You are still in a 64-gate matrix. But now, because you're also in the mammalian matrix, the energy is coming into you in a different form, in a different way, at a different angle. And that makes a difference. I asked him that question, and it comes into you. He couldn't specify, but it does come in differently. So I actually will print out a body graph in its hexagram form. I did that. I think, I'm not sure if I changed the colors to the accurate colors, but I will. So the sacred geometry of the tree of the body graph, the voice spent 5 days with Ra, making sure he got the measurements correct. He got the measurements correct, and he gave the measurements to Eric Memert. Eric did the neutrino program. When Ra wanted to do a program behind Eric's back, he did not own the copyright to the body graph. I own it through Rave Life Sciences. So he needed to change the proportions of the body graph in order to not be in breach of copyright. He didn't bother asking because he didn't want Eric to know he was going behind his back and getting a program written. But when I saw the Jovian program, which is wider than the neutrino body graph, it gave permission to the field to modify the original graphic. And the original graphic is the sacred body graph. So I feel very strongly about preserving original source material, which is why I'm editing all of the books I did with Ra. And when I say editing, all I'm doing is correcting typos, adding some punctuation, adding some commentary in my own words, but not changing any of Ra's language. I will not change source material, but I will make comments about it where it holds and where it doesn't. And it's interesting to see some of that material that I haven't looked at for so long. But I can't even look at those body graphs. I can't read one of those body graphs. The shape is wrong. The energy flow is wrong. It doesn't, I can't even look at them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some, like the heart is actually shaped like a heart, right? Like that's definitely not sacred geometry. So it's cute. It's a good marketing pitch, but it's not, if, makes sense to me, this whole sacred geometry thing. It's still new for my mind to accept, but it's, yeah, I get it somehow.
You
You
mean that
mentioned,
you have trouble accepting that only a sacred geometry body graph would be the one to use?
um, yeah, I suppose, but it's not that I don't want to accept it. I just need to experience it for myself somehow. So, and I think that's happening. I mean, I found you and found this work. So clearly I was disillusioned, like I was in, but I was disillusioned with the vibe, you know? And I've been talking to folks about that a lot this week of just, where human design is today, because while you were doing your clinical work and Facebook arrived and just information started shooting in every single direction, and things have been modified, and it's right, it's an avalanche of I would say good intent but misguided intent, so um to change the subject a bit, but along the same lines, and you mentioned the neutrino stream. So other folks have taken human design and they incorporate asteroids and the like. And my understanding is that like we're impacted by this neutrino stream. We're influenced by the energy of people around us. So as these pass through things, when it comes to us, it's not in its original form, I suppose, if that's the way to look at it. And I was having a conversation the other day with, I think, Amanda, a friend of mine, and I was started asking questions about satellites. There's a lot of satellites in space, and particularly Starlink, like Elon Musk's giant internet thing. I think he's at like 8,000 satellites, and eventually there'll be 40,000. So along those same lines, are we one day going to need to, maybe not need to, but should we be considering the influence of that many things where neutrinos are passing through it? Because there's a lot of data and energy passing through those satellites, right? It's literally every conscious word and thought ever. Like that seems like that could be disruptive, even from a neutrino standpoint. So I don't have more to add to that thought other than, I mean, is that kind of what's going on? Is 200 years ago, 500 years ago, we had each other's energy around us, but we didn't have all this stuff that we can't see, with neutrinos passing through it.
Well, there's a lot of things that haven't been disclosed. And I think somewhat in the near future, we'll know that there's extraterrestrials among us.
That seems
That
evident.
there are many galaxies where there are life. And thinking in even, I don't know whether there are neutrino streams impacting us the way Ross said or not. There's no way to know that. It's a nice story, but we know that the charts are based not on neutrino stream, but on astrology. So we don't have a chart of the neutrino stream. We have a chart of astrology with the assumption that the planets in some way have a relationship to the neutrino stream. I mean, so whatever's happening is going through the universe through us. So yes, the whatever is out in space is going to affect what comes into us. And we already see physiologic issues from chemtrails and other things like that. We know that there's a lot of fake climate change, where some evil forces are manipulating the environment. So hopefully it'll all work out. All I can do from my standpoint, all any of us can do, is function with honesty and integrity, compassion, forgiveness, and fulfill our mission.
Do Do you know what your mission is? I mean, I think you do because you've outright said, I forgot how you worded it, but you got a message a couple years ago and it was like time. And now here you are. Something to that effect. Um,
I didn't know my mission other than, and it's interesting because for years in trying to get my word out, everyone kept saying, "What's the pain? What's the pain? What's the pain?" And I don't operate by pain. So it's taken me a long time to realize that my mission is getting the four worlds out
Mhm.
as a personality theory book. I knew, I know I'm a writer more than anything. And I've known that my awareness of other dimensions has existed my whole life. And if I think back to my childhood, um, I was living the four worlds even then. I didn't know it, but I remember looking at people and asking questions about why are you doing it this way instead of this way? And really, when I look back retrospectively, I was asking which world they were choosing. And I could not really understand why people would choose a mental world over the spiritual world. It didn't make sense to me. And it still doesn't make sense to me. But I didn't put it together. I did my PhD in 4 fields because I couldn't choose one. I've always, and actually, I spoke to someone last week, and he mentioned he was a English literature teacher, and it reminded me. In college, I almost majored in comparative literature or religion, and I picked psychology because it was so easy.
mhm.
And I figured I could get literature on my own easier than I could get psychology. But what I did when I was teaching master's level personality theory class, I taught from Henry James' Portrait of a Lady. Because in that book, you see her, it starts out where she inherits money and she thinks she has choice. And you are following her perceptions the whole book. And at the end, you see the truth that she didn't see the whole time.
Mhm.
And all the data was there. And it was such an impactful book on me because what it showed is that when we live in a splintered consciousness, we do not have the fullness of conscious choice. So now, if I were to teach from that book, I would teach it differently. And one of the things I will teach from in the Four Worlds class is the TV show Naked and Afraid Excel. Seasons 11 had a really good Four Worlds cast.
Mhm.
Um, but once you can't know, as Steve Jobs said, you can't know until it's retrospective and you connect the dots.
Mhm.
So it wasn't until I got the Four Worlds as a viable theoretical um, imperative a couple of years ago
I'm gonna say that
that
was 2 years ago. Okay. Mhm.
I knew that that was the work.
Mhm.
I mean, I had it in the charts, I was teaching it, but I didn't know the breadth of it. And I hadn't fully connected the dots in my own life as to how every step of the way I was God's hand leading me and leading me and leading me, including the astrological piece. Because without the astrology, without the tree of life, I couldn't have put the research pieces together. And you need them all.
And that did that come to you as a download? Like you were having a meditation and you had like an aha moment, or what was that like a couple years ago?
No. In 1973, I started having dreams about knowing with a K. I'd always wanted to be a Jungian analyst. There were no open programs. I had left a message at some point with June Singer, the only Jungian analyst in Chicago at the time. And I said I wanted to be in Jungian training. There was no training program. And then after I started having the dreams of knowing with the K, June called me out of the blue and said, I have one opening in the training program. Do you want it? So I jumped at it. I was reading, so I was in training as a Jungian analyst for quite a number of years. And that led me to transcendental meditation. So my University of Chicago, my Jungian training, I studied at the Freud Psychoanalytic Institute because Kohut was just talking about narcissism. So I took a class on narcissism. And then my Kundalini experiences made it imperative that I learn how to control that. So each step added a piece. And as a clinician, each time I didn't have the skill that a patient needed to transform, I went and got it. And each new piece I added fit in a different world. Mm-hmm. But I didn't put it all together until I did Tai Chi Gong.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so simple, actually, like, and lovely. So yeah, who knew? I didn't. So talking about downloads, now asked this question earlier. When to trust your downloads and when to question them?
You have to know what the feeling is. Okay. When I first started having all of my psychic ability come back, or be conscious is a better way to say it. I remember sitting with a client and saying to her, who took care of you before you were 6 months old? And she didn't know. And I said, go ask your mom. She asked her mother, and her mother said no. I couldn't get rid of it. I knew because I knew because I knew. I knew with the K. And that's different than the feeling when you know with your mind. Mm-hmm. You have to learn to discern when it's real and when it's not real. And the energy of it feels different. When I was told to go to India, I didn't question it. When I was told to go public, when it comes from the divine, when it's God speaking to you or the Holy Spirit speaking to you, it's a different energy. It's not your energy. It's not mental, and it's not emotional, and it's not physical. Mm-hmm. It's spiritual, pure. You just know because you know because you know. Mm-hmm. And you would be surprised if it did. And with this lady, with this case, she went to her mother, and her mother said, nobody took care of you. And I could not get it out of my mind. 3 months later, she came in with a picture. And she said, I was going through a photo album and I said, who is this lady? And my mother said, she took care of you when you were a baby. And she had a picture of the woman. And it was in that period of time that her psyche got stuck.
Mhm.
So I knew, and it took me probably 2 years clinically to test with my patients. Does this ring true? Does this ring true? And to learn to discern within myself when it was coming from spirit and when it was a mental construct.
I had an experience yesterday where it was like I was talking to a friend. It was on a podcast. We were just talking about comedy. So that was the purpose of the thing. And we got talking about he has a gig coming up in a few weeks, and he's excited about it, but it could, he's a kind of an anxious fellow like me. And as he was talking about it, he started like pawing at his neck, and I was just immediately like, okay, something's going on here. And then he started talking about how there's a bunch of guys that he thinks would be great for that event, and and he was going to connect them with the organizers. And I got this voice that said, "Ask him about this." So I just said, "Hey, you grabbed your neck. Can we talk about it?" or something to that effect. And I said, "It sounds like you're self-sabotaging potentially here, because I could tell that you're uncomfortable about possibly doing this thing. And your next course of action was not to work on some material, but instead connect 2 or 3 other people for this event." And I said, "Is it possible that subconsciously you're creating an excuse where there won't be a spot for you?" And he had like his eyes like were like goldfish bowls. And that was one of those things like we talked about it afterwards, and I think it was fairly profound, and it really was my own voice in my head saying, "Ask him about this, like do it now." And it was cool. And because I got it recorded, I could go back and review it. So I watched it twice. I'm like, yeah, I did that. That's cool. So I'm just sharing that because I think I've had those moments all my life, but was not spiritually aligned with what I was doing. I wasn't healthy overall. So it was just noise. I didn't know what to make sense of it. And lately, I'm a lot quieter, calmer, holding space, and like that intuition is kicking in pretty significantly.
Good.
But, I don't get it's not a voice. It's not the voice. It's not a visual, but there's just like a whisper, like ask, like a nudge. That's all. It's really discreet. So, and I guess that's kind of with Now's question, like how to trust your downloads and when to question them. That's quite literally where I'm at. But so I appreciate that answer as well. Sorry, I just need to shut up. So we got about 10 minutes. Is there anything you'd like to talk about today?
Not other than what I've talked about. I mean, I'm excited about this four-world stuff. I did the integrated Beyond Human Design book was a #1 bestseller on Amazon, not just a bestseller, but a #1 bestseller, which is very nice. And I think if anybody who's listening is interested in signing up for either of the classes, now would be the time to do it. Because once these classes close, I will not start another class for probably 6 or 8 months. And the price will go up.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it's fun for me to be doing this work and to be experiencing the changes in people that are happening with the 5-day experience, especially because it's validating the research, which is when you break thinking about our life into the four worlds, and you begin to work with each world separately, what you learn about yourself carries a different frequency than when you are trying to deal with one of the worlds without the separation, because there's crossover contamination.
Mhm.
And the body maps are very critical in understanding the way the matrices work. Wouldn't it be interesting if we're all just computer generated and we've decoded the matrix?
Sure feels like it. I mean, that's quite literally a regular occurring thought. And it's all over YouTube as a notion as well. So I think Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan once and said something to the effect of it was like 8 billion to 1 that we're in a simulation. Like absolutely we're in a simulation. You just can't figure it out yet. And I think we're kind of piecing it together, right? Yeah. What's really interesting, I think, for me is people sharing their experiences. Like I think we're evolving as a species real time just by watching a YouTube video that you know what I mean? Like before information was delivered to us by government, by schools, and so it had a sales pitch. And now people are just sharing, right? They're just literally
Well,
sharing
they're
their
not just sharing, Sean. Most of the people on YouTube have a sales pitch.
sure. Yeah, they still have a yeah, for sure.
So, the information, like, the human design information, a lot of what's out there is misinformation. The body graphs are misinformation when they're distorted.
Mhm.
The voice didn't spend 5 days with Ra giving him the body graph if it wasn't important. It was the most important piece of information was the proportions. Because when you look at a body graph, and now when you look at an integrated body graph, and once we make it 3D, you're looking at how the energy flows in your own multidimensional matrix. That's pretty powerful.
Mhm. Is someone
Uh,
working on making it 3D? Like, is that an effort you're working on, or do you need
3D,
to? Sorry?
me. I
Like,
did it online. I did a computer generated transit body graph in the multidimensional.
hmm,
Uh, that was it's still on my computer. It's pretty interesting. But I would like to make it a model 3D. Um,
as in people could put in their own information and produce their own 3D chart. Is that what you mean by making a model? Yeah.
yeah, it would be really neat to do that.
100%. I mean, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I first discovered the body graph, I was so physically body unaware. I assumed the solar plexus was on the left side of my body, like just like where the triangle exists in the body, which, like, that's what I thought, being completely honest. And then it was kind of an eye opener. I was like, oh, that's not where it is. It's just there because you need to render this thing and have it make sense, right? So,
Right.
like, I was having all sorts of experiences like that. I was like, ooh, should have paid attention in class at school, but I wasn't a very good student. So, funny. Hmm. Okay. I think I need to wrap. I think I'm a little exhausted. I think I need to go take a little rest. But thank you as always. Looking forward to the course, absolutely. And I guess I'll see you next Thursday at your webinar. So
Yes. Next Wednesday, there's a master class. So I'm starting the 21st with a class where anyone who's registered will come to the class, and I want to just see who's in the classes, have people see who's in the classes, talk about what people have in mind, and get feedback.
I feel like I've seen an email on that, but I don't know that it's in my calendar. Would I just search my inbox for masterclass? Because I do get,
I'll have Cindy send out a note.
yeah, if you wouldn't mind, actually, I don't seem to have that one. I would like to,
When we send out the announcement about the transcript and the recording from the webinar, we'll make a point to do that.
cool. Excellent.
And I'll do, I guess I should have a class Facebook page, so I'll do that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Always fun.
Yeah, have a great weekend, eh?